Year 5, and welcome to today's science lesson. So we have now moved on to living things and their habitats. We looked at animals, including humans, before half term, and this is the topic we've moved on to now. So a lot of the topics are still quite similar because we're focusing on living things, which obviously includes animals and humans, and the habitats they're from, and we're focusing a lot on reproduction, both sexual and asexual reproduction. Okay, so we've touched on it a little bit already, but we're going to, before half term, but we're going to expand more on that in today's lesson and throughout the following weeks up until the Easter holidays. So, living things in their habitats. And what we're going to focus on today is making new plants. We're focusing on on plants and how they reproduce. Okay, so this is what we're going to be looking at today. So I can describe how some plants reproduce. That's what we're going to be focusing on. And our success criteria is that I can explain the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction, which you will be able to do by the end of the lesson. You will be able to identify the function of the parts of a flower. So you're going to be able to name all the different parts of a flower, and you should be able to, by the end, describe the ways in which plants are pollinated in order to reproduce. It's that bottom one there and the top one are the two ones that we're really going to be focusing on in particular today. So focusing first of all on reproduction, like I've mentioned before. So all living things need to make more of themselves so that their species does not die out. Same as humans and any other animal, okay? They need to reproduce so that more come along, okay? And then their species don't die, because if nobody reproduced, there wouldn't be any left. Reproduction is the process by which new living things are made. There are two types of reproduction, sexual and asexual reproduction, like I mentioned first. Now, sexual reproduction requires two parents to make one offspring. Okay, so it's just like humans, for example. Okay, you've all got two parents to make just yourself your one offspring. You've got two parents. Okay, an asexual reproduction needs only one parent, which creates offspring that are exact copies of the parent. So asexual reproduction is pretty much when an organism would just multiply. Okay, it just forms from one into another, and they look exactly the same. Okay, so humans, for example, they take part in sexual reproduction because we know that obviously you are not exact copies of your parents. Okay, you might look similar, you might have similar attributes, like you might have your mum's eyes and your dad's nose, but you're not going to be identical to them. You might just similarities. So going further then into reproduction, so you will learn about sexual reproduction that occurs in plants. Okay, so remember, sexual reproduction is when you've got two different parents and it makes one offspring. Living things that use sexual reproduction have sex cells called gametes. Okay, these are split into male gametes and female gametes. So it's basically all it's saying, all living things have basically your female sex cells and your male sex cells, or your female gametes and your male gametes. In plants, the male gametes or the sex cells are contained in the pollen. So plant's pollen, that is your male sex cell, and the female gametes are called the ovules. Sexual reproduction happens when a male sex cell and a female sex cell join together. This is fertilization. Okay, so when the pollen, which is the male gamete, meets the female gamete, which is the ovule, they join together, they fuse together, and this is called fertilization. And that's how another offspring is formed. That's how a baby then is formed, if you like. Sexual reproduction produces offspring that are similar to both parents but not identical to either. Like I mentioned earlier, you're similar to your parents, but you're not identical to them. So what we're going to focus on today is insect or wind. How do plants reproduce? Because obviously they don't have legs to walk around and reproduce like that. Okay, so instead, what happens is insects or wind will take the male sex cells and put it on another plant, another plant's female sex cell. Okay, but we'll go into more detail. If you don't understand, don't worry. We're going to talk through this now. So in pollination, pollen from the stamen, which is this part here, is transferred to the stigma. Now I'll go through more detail into this in a second, so don't worry. A pollen tube then grows down through the style to the ovary. The pollen then travels down the pollen tube and fuses with an ovule in the ovary. So basically all it's saying is that the pollen from this part here, okay, it gets taken then by the insect or wind. So say if like a bee lands on it, it might attach to the bee, or the wind might blow it off and it'll fly around the air or fly with the insect, and then the insect will land on another flower and it will land on the female sex cell bit here, or the stigma. The pollen will then join onto the stigma, go down the tube like that, into the ovary section. Okay, this pollen will then fuse with one of the ovules, which is one of these bits here, and that is your fertilization, and that is how plants then reproduce. So although flowers contain both the male gametes, the sex cell and the pollen, and the female gametes, most plants cannot fertilize themselves. So basically all that is saying is that the pollen, the male sex cells that come from here, cannot then get transferred onto its own female sex cell. Okay, it doesn't work like it cannot fertilize itself. Okay, so it has to go from one plant to a completely other one. They rely on other ways of transferring the pollen to the stigma. This starts the pollination and fertilization process. Two ways that flowers can be pollinated are by insect and wind, which is what I've described to you here. So what I'll do, I'll go through it one more time with you in case you're a little bit confused. So here's a big version of the plant. And in this bit here, the stamen, this is your filament and this is your anther. In your anther, that is where the pollen is, your male gametes, your male sex cell. So let's say you're a bumblebee and you're flying through the air and you come to this flower here and you're going to land on this anther. When you do that, you're collecting pollen. Okay, pollen gets stuck to you. Okay, and you've now got this male sex cell on you. You're then going to be aboard of this flower and you're going to fly away and you're going to land on another flower. And you land on the stigma here. This pollen then that you've had from the other plant is going to land onto this plant, and that's how fertilization happens, okay? Because the pollen, the male sex cell, then travels down the style into the ovary and fertilizes the female sex cell, the female gamete, the ovule, okay? And then they fuse together, they join together, and then a seed is created, which drops onto the ground and creates another flower. Okay, and that is basically the idea of fertilization, okay, and how plants reproduce. So what I want you to do now is I want you to sort the pictures of flowers and the explanations into the correct columns, which are on your Google document. So you're going to have 9 explanations, and I want you to put them into the correct columns. So what I would say with this is I actually imagine you were a bumblebee, okay, and you were flying through the sky and you wanted to go to a flower, okay. You're not going to choose one that looks horrible or smells bad or tastes bad, okay? So you're not going to go to any of them. So you're going to go to the ones that have a nice taste, that look pretty. Okay, you're going to choose the nice ones, aren't you? Okay, so when you're looking at your explanations, that's what you got to really try and focus on. Literally imagine you're a bumblebee. Which ones are you going to go to? Remember, you're picking it up and you're taking the pollen somewhere else. If you were the wind, for example, it's going to be attracted to the flowers. It's going to take the pollen from the flowers, where the anther, so these little bits here on this flower, is out in the open, so that then the wind can blow this pollen onto another plant. Okay, so also I would also use these pictures here of the plants. So these are the kind of plants that bees go for. So when you're organizing your the pictures, okay, you can just write the names in the columns instead of organizing the pictures. Choose the ones that look similar to these, where the anthers are coming out, the pretty ones, the attractive ones. Okay, don't choose the horrible ugly ones, because bees and insects don't like those ones. So what I want you to do is, on your Google document, you'll have something that looks like this, and I want you to organize them into the correct column. So organize them into flowers pollinated by the wind and flowers pollinated by insects. Okay, so you should have paused that, had a go, organize the correct explanations and photos. And then next, you would have noticed there was another column, or another table, sorry, underneath the table you just completed, saying sexual and asexual. So what I want you to do into those columns is put these into the correct columns for me. So you've got offspring are similar to their parents, but not identical. So remember, just like I mentioned earlier with you guys, you're not identical to your parents, but you're similar. So that is which kind of reproduction? Requires just one parent. Which reproduction does that go into? Needs 2 parents, which one's that, and produces identical offspring. So what I want you to do is copy down these 4 statements into the table on your Google document into the correct columns. If you're a bit confused about this bit, then just run back through the PowerPoint and it should have all of this information on there, so you'll be able to put them into the right columns for me. Okay, and that's the end of the lesson, guys. I hope that all made sense to you. Feel free to contact me if you need me. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you later for our live lesson.